APIs are kind of the invisible glue holding our whole digital world together. Seriously, think about it. Every time you're ordering food, checking the weather, posting a photo, yep, there's an API working behind the scenes. But have you ever noticed how some apps just feel effortless, while others are a total nightmare to use? Well, a lot of the time, the difference boils down to one thing: API design. Come on, we've all been there, right? You're staring at some confusing documentation, trying to figure out these weirdly named functions, and getting error messages that tell you absolutely nothing. It feels less like you're using a tool and more like you're trying to solve a puzzle where half the pieces are missing. It's just frustrating. And that's really the big idea here. A great API isn't a puzzle at all. It's a well-designed conversation. It has clear rules, it's predictable, and maybe most importantly, it actually helps you out when you get something wrong. So if we're going to have a good conversation, we need a shared language, right? We need some basic grammar. And for APIs, that grammar really comes down to two super simple things: nouns and verbs. Okay, let's start with the nouns. In the API world, we call these resources. A resource is just the thing we're talking about. It could be a user, a photo, an article, you name it. It's the object at the heart of our conversation. And when you have a bunch of them, like all of your users, we just call that a collection. Simple. And this is a really big deal. Just look at the examples here. A well-designed API URL describes the thing you're interacting with, not the action you're doing. So we always use plural nouns, like /users or /photos. Why? Because the action, the verb, like get or create, that belongs somewhere else entirely. So where does the action come from? Well, it comes from these guys, the HTTP methods. These are the verbs of our API conversation. Get means read. Post means create. Put is for updating, and delete, well, that one's pretty obvious. When you combine a verb like get with a noun like /users, the meaning is suddenly crystal clear. Hey, read me the list of users. See how clean that is? All right, so we've got our grammar down, our nouns and our verbs. Now let's see how they actually come together to form the real back and forth dialogue of the conversation, the requests you make and the responses you get back. Now, for this back and forth to actually work, everyone's got to speak the same language for the data itself. And in the modern web, that language is, without a doubt, JSON. It's lightweight, it's easy for us humans to read, and it's understood by pretty much every programming language and platform on the planet. It's the universal translator. Every time you talk to an API, one of three things is going to happen. It's actually pretty simple. If you get a 200-something code, that's a success. Everything worked. If you get a 400-something code, that means you, the client, made a mistake. Maybe you asked for something that doesn't exist. And a 500-something code, that means the server messed up. Just knowing this instantly tells you where to start looking when something goes wrong. And, this right here, this is where a good API really separates itself from a bad one. When an error happens, does the API just slam the door in your face, or does it offer you a helping hand? A generic bad request message is a total dead end. But an error that tells you why something failed, like user already exists, well, that turns a moment of frustration into a clear path forward for the developer. Yeah, this quote from Swagger's guide on API design just nails it, doesn't it? Your goal is to help the developer using your API succeed. And good feedback, especially through clear, helpful error messages, is one of the absolute best ways to do that. Okay, but what happens when you've got a ton of data, like thousands of photos or millions of articles? You can't just send all of that back at once. It would be crazy slow. Instead, a good API handles this gracefully with things like filtering to let you narrow down the search, sorting to get the results in the order you want, and pagination to deliver that data in small, easy-to-handle pages. All right, so we've laid the groundwork for a good conversation, but how do we make sure it's a relationship that lasts, that it can grow and evolve over time? Well, that's where we get into the really important stuff, like future-proofing your API. First things first, security. This stuff is absolutely non-negotiable. Every conversation needs to be private and secure. That means using HTTPS to encrypt everything. It means authenticating to know who you're talking to, and authorizing to know what they're allowed to do. And finally, rate limiting is like having a bouncer at the door, making sure no single person can overwhelm the system. But it's not just about being secure, right? It's got to be fast. Nobody wants to have a slow conversation. And when it comes to making your API fast and snappy, there are two absolute powerhouse techniques that make a world of difference.
First up is caching. You can think of this like the server's short-term memory. Instead of looking up the same answer again and again, it just keeps common responses handy for a super fast reply. Then there's compression. This is like vacuum sealing your data before you send it out, making the whole package way smaller so it can travel across the internet much, much faster. But look, things change, your API is going to have to evolve, so how do you add new features or change how things work without totally breaking all the apps that are already using it? The answer is a really important practice called versioning. You've got a few ways to pull this off, but honestly, one of them is way more common and straightforward than the others. That's URI versioning. You just put the version number, like V1 or V2, right there in the URL. It's so simple. This way, older apps can keep using V1 without a problem, while all your new development can start using the shiny new features in V2. So, we've talked about grammar, the flow of the conversation, and how to keep it going for the long haul. But if you walk away with just one thing from all of this, what should it be? It really boils down to this one simple idea. More than anything else, designing a truly great API is an act of empathy. It's about putting yourself in the shoes of the other developer who's going to use your creation and doing everything you can to make their job easier and, frankly, more enjoyable. So the next time you sit down to build an API, just ask yourself this one question. Are you building an asset that's going to empower other developers? Or are you building an obstacle they're going to have to struggle to overcome? Are you starting a clear, helpful conversation? Or are you creating another frustrating puzzle? The answer to that question will make all the difference.